Constance Darby is making her first appearance on our program today. She's written a new book called Lessons I Had to Learn. We'll talk to Constance not only about the writing of the book, but also what it's been like for her to reflect on these lessons for herself and now to be able to share them with the world. And if you're just hearing about Constance, I'll let you know at the end of our segment how you can find out more information about her and get the book too. But Constance, hello to you and welcome to the program.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. Happy to be here.
Hey, the pleasure's definitely all mine. So, Constance, let's kind of reflect on this experience. I mean, what has it been like for you already to see the way that people are responding to the book?
Oh, my goodness. The response from the book has been absolutely amazing. I've gotten so many responses from people who have read the book, who have been enlightened, who have been inspired, and just encouraged by the words written in the book. A lot of the lessons that I share with the readers are really candid experiences that I've gone through in my short life, but that most people will either have already encountered or the experiences that they will encounter in the future. And so it kind of brings back to remembrance those circumstances and lessons that they went through and how they can always overcome or how they've already overcome from them.
Yeah. Well, one of the things you mentioned, Constance, in the book, in the chapter, Live on Purpose, you say this,
Awesome.
Neither you nor I can effectively live as God intends unless we have a clear understanding of who He has called us to be. So when did you first discover that for yourself, exactly who you were called to be?
You know, I've always been a leader, so I've never, shied from being in the front. I've never been one to kind of hide from the spotlight. And so even as a young child, I've always had those attributes of a leader, wanting to do my best at all times, wanting to be in the front. I was the student in class who knew the answer all the time, and at times teachers had to say, okay, let somebody else answer. So having those attributes of a leader, even from a young child, and then, growing into adulthood, those attributes, of course, have carried on with me into my adult life. And so I vividly remember, being invited to speak to a graduating class for their baccalaureate service. And when I was preparing for that event, and I talk about that in the book, when I kind of identified what it was that I was called to do here on this earth, preparing for that event, and then going ahead and speaking to those graduates at that service, and something just felt right. It just felt like this is what I've been called to do. This is what I've been purposed to do. And so from then on, sharing and speaking and ministering God's word has really been my purpose, and really just wanting to convey and impart into the lives of other people that they also have purpose on the inside of them, and all they have to do is just try different things, as I share in the book, until you realize what God has called you to do.
Yeah. Well, you also attribute some of this to your mom, Constance. You write in the book, my mom always told me not to worry about what other people think. She tried to ingrain this into me at a young age, but it wasn't until I was ready to believe it that I grasped and held close what she had imparted like precious pearls. So what was it like for you to have her as an example when it came to what it was like for you to stand in confidence and be confident, but also to realize that you had a purpose that you had to answer to?
My mom is the type of mother who she's going to tell you like it is, and she's going to give you the advice whether you like it or not. And growing up, she always told us to be confident in who you are and really not to concern yourself with what other people are thinking or saying about you, as long as it's something that's not true. Now, she also was the mom who stayed on us and chastised us when we were wrong. And so if that's the case, then that was a whole different story. But she taught us, and when I say us, I have two younger sisters, but she taught us to really be confident in who you are and to not concern yourself with other people, because people are always going to have opinions of you. And so even to this day, she's still talking to us about that. And not that we haven't grasped it, but she encourages us. She still motivates us. And I'm just grateful to have a mother who wanted the best for us, but taught us those lessons at a young age that some people don't grasp until they're a lot older. And I think that my sisters and I have had the opportunity, or even the privilege, to kind of bypass some of those hard hurdles that people have and people struggle with regarding their identity because of what she imparted into us as young children.
Yeah, and I think the big thing I want our audience to take away from this, Constance, and as I said, we're going to let our audience know how they can get the book for themselves. But even though we may have someone in our lives that try to teach us the right way, to show us the right way, it really does become about us. You talk about in the book, especially in
Absolutely.
the chapter about living out loud, about character, building character, and how these habits can become a part of you both for the good and for the bad. You talked about, there have been some things that have taken you outside of your character, but what has it been like for you though to kind of reflect though on who you were meant to be, so that you can kind of recalibrate when you see that happening?
You know, reflecting on a lot of these experiences that especially that I've written in the book, it's been emotional. It's been enlightening. There's a lot of different types of feelings that kind of rise up when I think about some of the things, especially when you mention kind of getting out of character, because I think as a people, we would like to think that we always do the right thing all the time. But the
Right.
reality is, I know for me, is that that doesn't always happen. Even in my best attempts, that doesn't happen. And then I can recall, if I can be honest with you, that there have been times where I just flat out did not choose the right choice because I was either selfish, I wanted what I wanted, when I wanted it, and how I wanted it. And I know there's probably some other people out there who either have experienced that or who are
Right.
experiencing that even now, that there are choices that you're making or that you have made that you know, if you just be honest with yourself, that that's not the right choice. And so even in thinking about some of those experiences, it's like, hey, I've been there, I've done that, but also I talk about in the book how I overcame. And so, yes, we make choices
Yeah.
that are not ideal. Yes, we do things that we're not proud of, but we have a gracious God who always forgives, and then we just have to forgive ourselves, learn from the lessons, and that's kind of the intertwining spirit throughout the book, is just learn from the lessons. I don't beat myself up over things that happened decades ago. I've moved on. I've learned from them, and most importantly, I don't repeat them.
Right, and I think that's the big thing for all of us. I want to say, for those who are
Yes.
just tuning in, either on the radio side or online, you're listening to Conversations Live. We're excited to welcome Constance Darby to our program today. Constance has a new book out called Lessons I Had to Learn. I got my copy through Amazon.com. We'll remind you at the end of our segment how you can get your own copy of it. She shares some lessons that she's been able to learn for herself, but also some things that have helped to guide her. Now, we see two things that you've done in the book, Constance. You share famous quotes like from individuals like Albert Einstein, but you also do have scriptures throughout the book. One of those scriptures is found on page 48 of the book, and it's Philippians chapter 3, verse 14. I press on toward the goal to win the prize for which God has called me heavenward in Christ Jesus. When you think about the goal, because I think, you said something that I hope our audience grasps. We're coming to the end of another year here. A lot of us, set goals for ourselves, and we may have reached some of them or part of them or none of them. But the important thing is to start with the goal. I mean, how important has that been for you to be clear about what you want as you're kind of going from day to day?
It's so important to have a goal in mind as you're living your life, whether it is, today's Sunday. I know a lot of people prepare for the week, so they create these goals for the week. Or, we're also in the last quarter of the year. Having a goal where you want to see yourself by December 31st is so important. I'm getting ready to hop on a flight shortly to come back to Jackson, and if I were to get on that plane, Cyrus, and the pilot is just saying we're going to take a trip, but if they don't have a destination in mind, there's a possibility that we could fly forever until the fuel ran out. The only way we're
Yep.
going to get to where we need to be is that there is a goal in mind and that there's a destination that they're trying to reach. And as it is in flights, as it is on any type of trip that you're taking, it's just like your life. That's why many people call life a journey. Because as you're journeying through this life, you have to have goals so that you can not only know where you're going, but know how to get there and have a roadmap and see how far you've come. Because a lot of people, they're navigating through life and they're doing the mundane and the day in and the day out, but they don't have a clear goal in mind. And so they look back on January 1st, 2018, and they're in the same exact position that they are now that they were then, because there was not a clear goal in mind. So I think setting goals is so important, and I just want to be honest. There's going to be times where you don't reach your goal. That's why that scripture
Right.
says that I press. So that's not like I've already attained it. It's not like I've already achieved absolutely everything that I want to do, or you might not have achieved everything that you want to do to the listening audience. But the fact is that you're pressing towards the goal. You're pushing and you're striving to reach that goal. And I truly believe that if we continue to push to reach goals in our lives, that we will reach them. I'm just a firm believer. I don't know when that will happen for everyone, or, how that will happen, or what that journey will look like. But there are very few goals that you reach in life that you want either attain, or you might reach a different goal or go a little further than you anticipated. But I would hate to not have a goal than to have a goal and get a different one.
For sure. That's so true. You mentioned the journey, so we have to mention something else that you talk about in the book, Constance, something I experienced this year, and that's Houston traffic. You talk about, there may be people going through traffic, and you bring up a really interesting point in connection with Houston traffic that I think all of us can apply to wherever we might live, and that is that, we might be headed in a direction, but just because we're doing something doesn't make it right. It may just be convenient. You talk about, of course, the driving laws, how some people feel about those. I experienced that in Atlanta as well, as we see it in Mississippi too. But, you talk about that comparison. I think it's great that you're able to give us something that people can relate to. Take us into that and how you got to thinking about what is right versus what is convenient, and kind of using that example of traffic to do that.
That concept of right versus convenient came to me, I think it was sometime last year, because I see a lot of people that are doing what is convenient right now, but it's not necessarily the right, or if I can use a biblical term, the righteous thing to do. And so there are times when we allow our conveniences to trump what we know is right, because what we see that is convenient is what we want, what we desire, and what feels good or feels right in the moment. But in the long term, there are some repercussions and some things that we might have to suffer because we made a convenient choice instead of a right or a righteous choice. In that particular part of the book that you're referring to, when I'm talking about the high road and the fast road, and sometimes the high road, the fast road, the road that a lot of people are choosing, it might be the convenient way to get to the destination, but is it really the right way? And a lot of times you've got to get off that freeway and you've got to take that back road to get to your destination, because the freeway is too congested. There's too many people that are on the freeway, and if we take it to our personal lives, some of those convenient choices, they, even though they may seem convenient and it seems like everybody is doing it and it is the right thing to do in our society, is it really right, or is it really righteous, or is it just a convenience? It's convenient to take the route that everybody else is choosing, or is it the right thing to take the different route, and the route that God has purposed for your life? Because just because something is convenient, it doesn't make it right. And so we have to determine, and really for me, what does the word say? What does God's word say? What does the word say? What are your principles and your values say as far as what is righteous and what is convenient? And, if you're a believer, then, of course, as I just mentioned, that's the word of God. But I think everybody has some type of rules and principles that they govern their lives on, and what does that say compared to society? And so are you doing what's convenient for you in the moment, or are you doing what's righteous and that's going to have a lasting value, not only on your life, but even on your legacy?
Yeah. We didn't talk about the why, Constance. I think now is a great time to do that. Before we get into the last point I want to discuss from the book. Why did you feel as though now was the time to write this book?
That's a good question. I wanted to write this book, and if I can just be honest with you, that I was supposed to write it, or I desired to write it a couple of years ago, and then, that's just the goal that kind of I kept pushing back. But I wrote this book because I felt like I had a story to tell. And that's pretty much it. I felt like I had something that I wanted to share with someone else, and not only just to share it, but to also show people how they can overcome. I feel like every experience and everything that you go through, it's not just for you, but it's also for somebody else. And so you mentioned that you've read the book, and there has been some highs and lows that I've experienced, and I, of course, I will wish that some of the lows didn't exist. But if I didn't experience those lessons at those low moments, I wouldn't be able to share how I overcame, how someone else can overcome. I wouldn't be able to have that vantage point. And so I think it was good for me to share this book and to get this book in the hands of readers so that they can know that even though you might have experienced some hard or some difficult times in your life, or if you haven't experienced them yet, you might experience them in the future. This is what I used, and this is how I overcame, and you can too. And so I wanted to write this book because I wanted to share with people that you can make it through. You can make it through. These are lessons that I had to learn, but I had to learn them so that I can share with someone else. And so that's why I wanted to write the book.
Yeah. Did you have any fear? Because, a lot of times when we are doing something that is personal, that kind of puts ourselves up there. You're laughing already. But, I think, there's this whole thing about, kind of being exposed to people. Did you have that feeling for yourself?
Absolutely. And I laugh because absolutely. Chapter 3 talks about living through disappointments, and in that chapter I talk about a failed relationship that I just knew was going to be the best thing since sliced bread, and it didn't happen, and it didn't pan out the way that I expected it to. And I remember, of course, when I was reading it and preparing it and writing it and thinking about it, it was so easy to put it on the paper. Sometimes, and then there are times where kind of recounting that experience kind of gave me a little nerves. But I remember when I sent the first set of books out to those individuals who pre-ordered the book. And I was in my living room, and it was about a day or two after the shipment had gone out, and I said to myself, someone is reading about this chapter right now. They're reading this, and they're reading about my life, and I have to be open and vulnerable because it's already out. And so I was a little nervous at that point, but, that was a couple of months ago, and here we are, and the book is still selling. So I don't have that anxiety about that particular chapter or any of the chapters at this moment. But it was. I think when you are vulnerable and you take off, the facade or, the perception that people think of you, and you really put yourself out there, it can be a little anxious and you can be a little nervous about it. But I also believe that it's in those moments that you're anxious or in those moments that you're nervous that's exactly what you need to do. Everything is not supposed to come easy. And the fact that I was a little nervous about it, I felt like, go ahead and do it, because you got to get out of your comfort zone. Someone needs you to be out of your comfort zone. Someone needs to hear what you have to say. And if I would have just talked about, Cyrus, the good times in my life, there's somebody who everything hasn't been good for them. So I needed to share those difficult moments like that particular situation, because there's somebody else who's going to read this book or another disappointment that they experienced. Case in point, there's a lady who read the book, and she lost her mom, and it was kind of unexpected. And so she read the book, and she talked about being in tears when she read that particular chapter. It wasn't a relationship failure like mine was, but it was a loss of a mom, and she felt that disappointment because it didn't turn out, or her mom's life didn't turn out how she wanted or expected it to. And so the fact that I was able to be vulnerable, the fact that I was able to take off the mask and say, hey, this is what happened to me, it encouraged and it helped her, and it's helping her to heal through that process of losing her mom. So, yes, I was nervous to answer your question, but I'm so glad that I shared that particular story, and it's healing for me. It's healing for me to share that with other people, like, hey, I'm past that. I've overcome that, and whatever you're going through, like I keep saying, you can overcome it as well. So, yeah, that particular chapter was a little difficult.
Got you. And you know what? And I think, we all know what it's like to hold on to something that we personally want, but that may not be right for us or good for us. and that's one of the things you talk about in that chapter. Constance, for sure. The last thing I want to talk to you about from the book is going back to the chapter Live on Purpose, because there's a very big lesson that I want to leave our audience with that I hope they really get. I learned this in my life. It seems like you have learned it in your life, Constance, and that is that everyone's journey is their journey. We don't have the right to try to tell someone what their purpose should be or how to live their purpose. You talk about in the subheading of that chapter, Live on Purpose, in A Perfect Fit, you go back to the example of Cinderella and how there's a reason why that shoe only fit her, because it was only destined for her. How important has that been for you to remember? It doesn't matter really what anyone else wants for you. The importance of recognizing for yourself and living for yourself what your purpose is.
It's been so important because the reality is, Cyrus, that everybody, even in their good intentions, everybody can't speak into your life, and everybody can't speak to the purpose that God has for you. Now, there are some people who have some insights. There are some people who really possibly are prophetic, but at the end of the day, you know, you have to not only hear from God, but you have to know who you are and to live the life that you desire and to live the life that God has called you to live. And so even in that Cinderella story, you know, all of her experiences, all of her setbacks, everything that she'd gone through kind of positioned her, and I talk about that being positioned in the right place, it positioned her to live out the purpose that was predestined for her. And so even in our lives, regardless of what it is, you know, some people might not be happy for you. Some people might not cheer you on. The people who you expected to be there might not be there. And all of those things may happen, and all of those things will happen at some point in our lives. But as long as you are confident in where you are, I call it being in the center of his will. And I thank God every day that I know that I am in the center of his will because I have so much peace. I talked to a group of girls just recently, and they were asking, you know, well, how do you know if it's something that you're doing on your own and you're forcing to happen, or if it's something that you're purposed to do and it's something that God has called you to do, and how do you know the difference? And I told her the difference is the peace, because whenever it's something of God, peace will just follow, and you'll just know, you'll be so comfortable, you'll know that this is exactly what I'm supposed to be doing, because it's not supposed to be hard. You're going to have difficult moments, but you shouldn't be straining all the time. It shouldn't be hard all the time. There should be some peace, and there should be some comfort in knowing that you are doing exactly what you've been called and you've been positioned to do at this moment in life. So I love that story about Cinderella and how it just ties into purpose, because intertwined all throughout that story is definitely purpose and destiny.
Right. So what is your hope, Constance? We've kind of talked about some of the components of the book. We're about to let our audience know how they can get it for themselves. When people finish Lessons I Had to Learn, what do you hope they're able to learn, not only about you and your journey, but also what's possible on their own journey?
There are a few things that I want the readers to take away after they've read this book. And one of those is that, as I've mentioned a few times, you're not alone in what you're experiencing. So whatever it is that you're experiencing, there are so many other people who have experienced and who are experiencing the same type of hurdles, the same type of lessons. And because you're not alone, you can make it through. And so I feel like one of the themes throughout my book is hope. Like you can make it through. I had to learn these lessons because they've made me who I am today. So that's one of the things I want the readers to take away. And then also kind of intertwined throughout the book is being who you were called to be, that purpose aspect. From chapter 1 to the end, purpose is all throughout there. Every chapter isn't entitled purpose, but you can kind of see, knowing who you are, being confident, living unapologetically, being confident in who you are, having purpose and living out that destiny. I want readers to understand that regardless of who they are, that they have purpose on the inside of them. God has given them purpose, or whoever they believe, they have purpose. There's a reason why they are here, and that is to live out a purpose. And then the last thing, it's not necessarily in the book, but it's a result of the book is to inspire people to do whatever it is that they desire to do. I've had so many people come to me since I've written the book and ask, what was it like? I've always wanted to become an author. I have a manuscript